All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is not quite evening, but we will go ahead and get started because we do have quite a few participants that are already on the line right now. And if you are there, if you want to make your presence known, if you want to throw up a quick reaction just to let folks know you're alive, everybody can do a wave or maybe a heart. Just let me know that you're there, alive, well, and ticking. Great. I see hearts, I see hands, I see celebrations, I see good vibes. So I think we could go ahead and get started. Hello to everyone. My name is April Dobbs. I am the communications manager here at the Georgia Justice Project, and I would like to welcome everyone here to this webinar. It is called Voting Rights for People in Georgia Who Have a Felony Conviction. And we are going to share quite a bit of information today about how to navigate through this system. If you're new or may be new to what GJP is, we are an advocate for justice through legal defense and policy reform. We ensure that Georgians impacted by the criminal legal system have a voice and a future. And today's wonderful session is going to be led by our dedicated team members. We will welcome Ann Colleton, who is our policy and outreach coordinator, Dominique Harris, who is our outreach associates, and they will be the facilitators of today's webinar. We'll also be we'll be able to interact and have our answers or so questions answered by our legal director, Brenda Smeaton, who's also one of the facilitators of today's webinar. We bring a wealth of knowledge and will guide us through today's important discussion. So we thank you again for joining us, and we can go ahead and dive into this important information. On today's goals and agenda, we're going to talk about the criminal legal system and its impact on voting, who is eligible to vote in Georgia, First Offender Acts exceptions, fines and fees, sentence completions, early termination for probation, and of course, we can talk about the many GJP materials and resources that we offer. And then last but not least, question and answer if you have any questions there. Now, the good thing about it is that we have a question and answer component here on this Zoom. So if you have a question, feel free to throw it up in the question area or in the comments, and we'll try to address those in progress. We want this to be somewhat interactive, so we could pause to answer a question. Feel free to do that. It's not super formal. And just to also let you know that this webinar is being recorded and we will share it later. So if you missed some parts of it, it's perfectly fine. Or if you want to share it later, you're welcome to do so. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into our webinar so we can get into this excellent content. And I'm going to kick this over to Ann Colleton and Dominique.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dominique Harris, and I'm the outreach associate with GJP. And I'll jump right into it. GJP's mission and theory for change. One is to reduce the number of Georgians that are under correctional control, and second is to reduce the number of reentry barriers that those formerly incarcerated people and formerly justice impacted people face. We do that by 3 steps. First, we offer legal representation and social service to individuals that may be facing a case and forcing in DeKalb County. Secondly, we work against policy and systemic changes. At the point of attack, we work against that. And lastly, we do community outreach, building relationships and awareness, creating partnerships and collaborating, just getting that information out there and making the community more aware and those organizations more efficient and getting that message out there. This is an example of our direct services. First is this card also will be distributed and is available for anyone to distribute and have it at their services. So first, we offer criminal and legal defense for Fulton and DeKalb counties. There's pending cases, so you not only get a lawyer, but you'll get a social worker also, but that's only for Fulton and DeKalb County. Secondly, is early termination of probation. We advocate and represent Metro Atlanta. And lastly is criminal records clearing. There's restrictions, sealings, and pardon for eligible Georgians. And that advocacy and representation is for statewide. to begin the intake process, we ask that people attend our first Friday. That's every first Friday of the month, where you can get information about records clearing and other GJP resources. And here are a couple QR codes just showing to the website and showing the self-advocacy tools that we have. With that being said, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Ann.
Oops. Okay, thank you, Dominique. Is that? Oh boy. Is that working?
We're still on the intake.
Not, okay, boy. Okay, sorry about that. All right, well, thank you, Dominique and April. We're going to give a little bit of context. I'm Ann Collison, the Policy and Outreach Associate at Georgia Justice Project. And so we're going to start by giving a little context of the criminal legal system and why this matters. Why do we have to talk about the criminal legal system and voting? So we're going to start with some bad news, but I promise we will get to some more optimistic things about what we can do to change that. So you might know that that United States is the mass incarcerator of the world. We have 4% of the world's populations. But 20% of the world's incarcerated people. That is not because we have the higher crime rate. Actually, we have very comparable crime rates to the other states that are listed on here, our NATO allies, with the exception of homicide with a firearm. We're an outlier in that. But so this is just a little bit of context. So the next slide compares Georgia to other states. So these are all the 50 states in the United States. And unfortunately, Georgia is the leader in this as well. So we are #1 in the overall rate of correctional control. And by that, we mean people who are incarcerated in a prison or a jail or under some form of supervision with probation or parole. So we're #1 overall. We are also #1 in probation rate by far. That is the dark red line on the right-hand side. And we're also 4th in incarceration rate. Again, this is not because of our crime rate, where we rank 26th in crime rate in the United States. But again, this is about how we respond to crime as a state, as a country, but that makes us lead the country. And again, we're 9th in the rate of felony disenfranchisement because of those long sentences, because of the number of people that we catch up in the system that impacts our ability to vote. So how did we get here to be the world's leader and the country's leader in mass incarceration, or the number of people who are under supervision of some sort? So unfortunately, we have a long history in the United States that dates back many years. Currently, right now, there are 200,000 Georgians who are currently disenfranchised and cannot vote because they're serving a sentence for a felony conviction. 1/3 of that group of people are incarcerated, and 2/3 are on supervision. So are actually out in the community, living, working, paying taxes, but still unable to participate in democracy. So we'll talk more about that problem with probation a little bit later. But the history of felony disenfranchisement in Georgia goes all the way back to the 13th Amendment in 1865, where slavery was outlawed except as punishment for a crime. Georgia and many other southern states then passed black code laws right after that allowed formerly enslaved people to be arrested for minor things as an excuse to convict and incarcerate people who would then be leased back out to the same plantations and companies that were previously employing slave labor under the convict leasing system. During Reconstruction, formerly enslaved people gained citizenship, and there was some other legislation that improved voting opportunities for formerly enslaved people. But then just a few years later, Georgia added the felony disenfranchisement to the Georgia Constitution. So then you fast forward to the 1950s and 60s and the American Civil Rights Movement, again, gaining a political power. And then the war on drugs was declared in 1971, which is what caused our prison populations to skyrocket. That's well documented, as is the documentation about the political motivations behind the war on drugs. So our current system of mass incarceration and mass supervision is built on that very foundation. So we need to acknowledge that and to discuss that. And in terms of how we're going to change that. So every step in the criminal legal system has discretion. So police, but they can decide where they're going to police, where they're not, which neighborhoods are going to go in, who gets arrested, who gets a warning, who is offered diversion, who is not, who gets charged with a misdemeanor, who gets charged with a felony, who gets sentenced to prison, who gets probation instead, how long is a sentence. So all of those things are built into that same foundation and have discretion. So that's the system that we're dealing with. But so what can we do about it? So Dominique mentioned earlier that we do policy change. So we'll put some information in the chat if you're interested in following along with our policy efforts. We're mostly focused at Georgia Justice Project right now on reentry barriers, or changing the law around reentry and mitigating some of the problems that people have after they've been caught up in the system. There's more to do, of course, but that's one thing that we're doing. If you're specifically interested in ending felony disenfranchisement law in the state of Georgia, we give a shout out to Karima Hanifa and Iman Atlanta, who has their No Taxation Without Representation campaign. And again, we'll put some information in the chat about that if you'd like to sign their petition and join that movement. And then, of course, voting. That's why we're here today, talking about voting and how our vote can change that. I talked earlier about the discretion in the system that leads to people, this massive system that we have, and every single person in that system is either elected or appointed or hired by someone who is elected. So we have an opportunity with our vote, and by helping other people exercise their right to vote, to impact that system. And so now I'll pass it back to Dominique to talk about our focus for today on voting.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Ann. So the history was amazing. So, but our focus for today is to engage and empower people that can vote. This number at the top, 450,000 people have completed their felony sentence and are eligible to vote now in Georgia, but often they don't know. That's our goal, like that's our task as organizations, to really mobilize this 450,000 people that have completed their sentence and have their rights back, and that they should be exercising those rights. Secondly, as of 2021, the new early termination of probation law was passed that re-enfranchises 175,000 people who are on probation, that adds to that 450,000. We really have to mobilize the voter block and get these people to understand their rights and combat this misinformation. And lastly, there's 40,000 people that are under first offenders or conditional discharge sentences that technically never lost their right to vote because they wasn't convicted, but they're under the First Offenders Act. We really have to mobilize these people and just mobilize this voting block and inspire them to vote, like the topic says, empowering and engaging the people that can vote and combat this misinformation. Go to the next one, Em. And you go to the next one, Em. Okay. So true enough, I just mentioned all those people that can vote, but there's a lot of voters apathy. This title at the top, why should I vote for a government that convicted me? That's very understandable, and I understand that feeling. Things like distrust in the system, being treated like a second-class citizen, voters' apathy that leads to mistrust in the political process, or just misinformation and misunderstanding of voting rights causes this feeling. But we can't focus on challenges. We have to focus on opportunities, because where there are challenges, there's also opportunities. So what are these opportunities? People can really have a say-so, and the people that are elected that have touched their lives, these systems that have touched their lives, and focus can be placed on the down ballot instead of the top of the ballot, such as the presidential election. But that down ballot, the sheriffs, the solicitor generals, the county commissioners, the state representatives, the people that the formerly incarcerated people really know affect them, but they may not know that these people get elected. So this is the different language. This is the verbiage that we have to use to empower these people, because it's very understandable why a person wouldn't feel like they could vote if they didn't know the total democratic process.
I'm sorry, Dominique, and everyone else. I'm
okay.
having problems with the slides. So thank you, Dominique. And now we're going to focus on who can vote, so that everybody knows the basics of Georgia law. So this map is just a reminder that every state has different voting laws. So we hear things on the national news, right? Whether it was last year when people were being arrested in Florida because they had outstanding fines, or in the last few days about other states' voting laws and who can vote if they have a felony conviction or not. So this is just a reminder that every state's law is different. And so what you hear on the news might not apply to Georgia. So today we're going to talk specifically about Georgia law. So who can vote in Georgia if they have a felony conviction? So as long as someone is not currently serving a sentence for a felony conviction, they can vote. As soon as their sentence is complete, the right to vote is automatically restored to them. They don't need their record expunged or pardoned or any special process. All that they have to do is re-register. So what we mean by sentence completion is that they have served any time that they had in prison, and they completed any term of probation and or parole that they had. So including any time on non-report or unsupervised status. And Dominique will talk more about that later. But as soon as someone's complete sentence is done, all they have to do is register and they can vote. The only exception to having to wait until your sentence is complete is if someone is serving a felony First Offender Act or conditional discharge sentence. Even if that's a felony, as long as the status hasn't been revoked, they can vote while they're under that sentence. So that is at least 40,000 people in Georgia right now who often don't know that they are eligible to vote now. So, and I just want to clarify that being sentenced under the First Offender Act is a specific thing. It does not necessarily mean just somebody's first felony conviction. It is the First Offender Act. So usually someone knows if they were offered that. But if they don't, we can help them figure that out by looking at their sentencing paperwork. If someone is in jail, and they can vote as long as they're not currently serving a sentence for a felony conviction. So if they've been charged with a felony, if they're not also serving a different felony sentence, if they've been charged with a felony and it's pending, they can vote as long as they don't have another sentence that they're serving at the same time. And misdemeanors don't affect voting rights at all. So again, just to reiterate, as soon as someone's probation and parole is complete, they just have to re-register and they can vote. So we always get asked the question about fines and fees, because this is, as I said, in other states, it's an issue. In Georgia, though, in 2020, the Georgia Secretary of State put something on the website, on my voter page, that clarifies this. So it says that you can vote as long as you have completed your sentence and paid your fines. But then it goes on to say that fines that are imposed as a condition of probation are automatically canceled upon completion of probation. And then it goes on to say that other outstanding monetary obligations like restitution, fees, costs, and surcharges don't impact voting rights if your sentence is complete. So again, the question is your sentence complete? And if it is, then you can vote. And I think Dominique is going to talk about that.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Ann. So yes, not sure if your sentence is complete. No documentation is really required for a person to register to vote. I'm sorry. As soon as their sentence is complete, the DCS tells the Secretary of State that their sentence is complete and their rights are restored, and all they have to do is register to vote. But we know that sometimes there's red tape and things that may happen. So this is a DCS certificate stating that a person's sentence is complete, just to give that extra confidence and their merit that they're done with their sentence. A person can also reach out if they're having trouble registering for this certificate. They can also reach out for other things, such as a letter from their probation officer indicating that their sentence is complete, or even a court order letter saying that their probation is terminated early, or their sentence is complete. This is Georgia's criteria for long-term probation and the eligibility. Basically, serve 3 years on probation and not have any new arrests other than non-serious traffic violations, no revocations in the last 24 months, pay all restitution this time, but it does not include fines and fees. So 3 years served, no trouble in the past, and those in that time, except for non-serious traffic violations, and paid all restitutions, but does not include fines and fees. If you meet this criteria, you should reach out to your probation officer and begin that process. On our website, we have a lot of self-advocacy tools. And as you see, this 175,000 people that are on probation. Georgia puts more people on probation than the whole state, the world. Like, this is our pact to get these people off probation. And since this new law has been coming to effect, like, it's something that we really should push. So scan the QR code and get out there and advocate. Okay, so some people-centered language. We know we don't want to label people. We don't want to see people as the things they do. We want to see people as people. So instead of saying things like felon, you will use a word like person with an arrest or a conviction. Or instead of saying things like ex-con or ex-offender or inmate, you'll say things like returning citizen or a person living with a felon or a person impacted by the justice system. Similarly, it gets more broader or deeper than just referring to a person living the justice impacted. If you were speaking to a person suffering mental health, you wouldn't say that person is schizophrenia. You would say that a person that's diagnosed with a mental health disease or a mental health diagnosis. Similar, you wouldn't say a person facing weight problems. You wouldn't call that person obese, or another word, you would say person suffering weight problems. So just try to use people-centered language to humanize a person, to always empower a person, because the formerly incarcerated people are already marginalized and judged. So whenever we can empower those people to strive forward and want to do better, we should always do that. And I'll do some, man. So 3 key points to remember. If someone says that they can't vote because they have a felony, you have to ask them these 3 questions. Is your sentence complete? They probably don't know that once their sentence is complete that they could vote. So that's the first question you ask them. Is that sentence complete? And you go into, well, are you off paper? Are you on probation? And you tell them, well, yeah, I'm done with everything. Their sentence is complete. They can vote. They just have to go re-register and they get their rights back and they can vote. Secondly, were you charged as a under the First Offender Act, a conditional discharge? And if they were, you explain to them that they never was convicted, that they're under the First Offenders Act. So they never lost their right to vote. As long as their status has not been revoked, they can still vote. And lastly, have you been on probation for 3 years? If you have, you may be eligible to come on probation and vote. According to the new eligibility, 3 years of probation, no revocations, and basically keeping a clean record, that person can come on probation as long as that restitution is paid, but it does not include fines and fees. And this last thing is, if a person is very unsure or is afraid, lack confidence of talking to the probation officer or going to vote, they can always reach out for this certificate of completion sheet, so they can feel more confident about going to register or going to try to vote or do anything relating to their rights.
Thank you, Dominique. So this is just a summary of the materials, and feel free to put questions in the Q&A section and we can answer them now. This is just an example of some of the materials that we have at the Georgia Justice Project. So especially if you're working with a voting organization or doing outreach in the community, the things on the right-hand side are these 2-sided cards. One side is about early termination of probation and the other side is about voting. So we are happy to send you those that you can use in your outreach. We also have posters that you're welcome to take and put up wherever you think, in your nonprofit organization, at a bus stop, at a restaurant, wherever you think justice impacted people might see that. And we are actually, next week, we will also have yard signs that we can share. And we also have a canvasser guide on our website. So the 3 points that Dominique just went over, we have on a canvasser guide that will help walk you through how you can help someone know that if they're eligible to vote. And on our website, there's actually like a 15-second quiz that you can take to find out if you're eligible. So, and that's some QR codes that can help access information. But we are happy to answer more questions if they've been put in the Q&A or the chat, and we will send the slides and the recording out to everyone who registered.
You got this question, Brenda?
Yeah, so Willie should put a good question that I think needs clarification in the chat, which is about the issue that people are often confused about is fines and fees and restitution. So could you guys talk a little bit more about that?
Because I went over that slide. So what at least your question was, they can vote if they have fines and fees, but not restitution. According to the Secretary of State website, you can vote regardless if you have fines and fees or restitution. So when restitution comes up, that's early termination of probation. That's the only time restitution comes back up. But as far as voting rights, according to the Secretary of State, fines and fees don't matter, and any things imposed restitution don't matter. So as long as your sentence is complete, off paper, done prison sentence, you can vote. Restitution just comes back up when you're trying to get your probation terminated. But as far as just voting, once that sentence is complete, the DCS is supposed to contact the Secretary of State and your rights are automatically restored. You just go register and you can vote. So fines and fees, restitution does not have anything to do with voting. It does not stop you from voting.
Exactly. Yes. I think one thing I'll add to that, Dominique said it, restitution is an issue when you're talking about early termination of probation. And just for people who don't know the difference between what is a fine, what is a fee, and what is restitution. Restitution, many cases don't have restitution at all. It only is if your case has restitution that is court ordered to a victim. And so many cases don't have it at all, but if you do have restitution in the case that was court ordered to be paid back to a victim, that is what has to be paid in order to be eligible for early termination of probation. But if your probation term runs out and you still have unpaid restitution, as Dominique said, it doesn't impact voting at all. It's just if someone is seeking to terminate their probation early.
We have a raised hand from Joyce Barlow. So Joyce, if you're there, you're open to ask your question.
I think I just made it so you can speak, Joyce, so go ahead.
That was an error. I'm sorry.
I know we had at least one other person that was raising their hand that wanted to, Sean, if you wanted to go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys can hear me?
Yes. Yes.
So, the thing that we have taught our folks to utilize is off paper as the term, but it sounds like from, I guess my question is, from what you guys are saying that the Secretary of State is saying is that they don't necessarily have to be quote unquote off paper. They just need to have completed their sentence. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Well, that's off paper means the completion of the sentence. So the probation is a part of the sentence.
Okay,
so
the probation is part of the sentence.
The probation is a part of the sentence. So off paper is just the completion of the entire sentence. So if someone has like a split 10 through 5, that the extra 5 years is also a part of that sentence. So I would say keep saying that that off paper tag, because that's very that's a trigger word with the demographic, and they will understand what that means. So, but yeah, off paper and probation, that's just completion of the whole sentence. The sentence accounts for the time spent in prison and also the time spent on probation or parole. Like that's the whole sentence, the completion of the sentence.
All right, so let me ask you this, Dominique. I've done 5 years. I got a 5-year probation sentence, and I owe $6,000. So, am I to understand that I've done my 5 years, and then when I do my 5 years of probation or parole, even if I have not paid the fines, but I've done the 10 years altogether, I can vote?
You can vote, yes. And hopefully you won't have to do all those 5 years, because we got that 3-year early termination law that we're going to try to get you off probation in 3 years. So hopefully it'll be 8 years instead of 10 years.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that
for sure, you can vote like the rest
for me and my
of
team that the financial part is no longer the issue.
Not pertaining to voting. Not pertaining to voting.
Yeah, if you go on my voter page, Sean, you'll see there's the asterisk next to, I'm 17 and a half, I'm a citizen, And the last one is, I'm not serving a sentence for a felony conviction, and there's an asterisk next to it. And below that, it says that fines are canceled upon completion of probation, and that restitution, fees, costs, and surcharges don't matter. So that's the newly clarified information that was put out in 2020 by the Secretary of State. And so, yes, those other things don't matter if your probation is complete.
And Sean, if you're not too shy, would you like to share where you're joining us from today?
So I work for New Georgia Project. My particular, and I have folks on the call from my team. We do voter registration across the state of Georgia. We have 12 offices, like I said, pretty much covering the entire state of Georgia. But we are interested in getting folks who've been marginalized, whether that be Black folks, justice impacted folks, young people, LGBTQ, anybody who is often ignored. We're just trying to get them folks registered, and then also provide them the information so that they can vote and be civically engaged intelligently. So yeah, we're just trying to get, the numbers for me are astounding as far as the number of folks who don't realize that they can vote. And we talk to those people every day. So I'm just trying to make sure that my team is well educated, well versed, that we run across folks who've been justice impacted and can vote and don't know they can. I just want to make sure we get them the best information. So that's me.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for being your team. And one thing we didn't say earlier is that Dominique and I are happy to do trainings like this with, with individual organizations as well. If you have a team that would like to have a training like this, we'd be happy to come out and do that, or do it on Zoom.
If it's okay, I want to follow up on what Sean said about, the language they use is off paper, and that's language that we use a lot too. That is a great shorthand to get people's attention, to include most of the people that may think that they're disenfranchised when they're not. But like everything, you usually need to go to a little bit of a deeper level to see some of the nuances of that. So there are some folks that are still technically on paper that can vote. So Dominique and Ann talked about this, that folks that are serving felony sentences under first offender or conditional discharge can still vote. So it is a good way to connect with folks, but definitely there's a need for some more information to follow up with that.
Brenda, we have a question in the Q&A box, and it is, where are you suggesting people go to receive an official government issued ID besides the driver's license?
I would connect you with Vote Riders, and someone just put their information in the chat. They are specifically focused on helping people get ID in order to vote. So the information is in the chat.
I wanted to clarify one thing. I apologize if Dominique and Ann, you said this, but I think another place where folks can get confused is around non-reporting. A lot of people are placed on non-reporting status after 2 years, but that doesn't mean that your probation sentence is done. Hopefully, if you've got a longer probation sentence, you'll be able to terminate at 3 years if you meet the criteria for that. But you are still technically on paper or on probation, even if you're on reporting. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, like Brenda said, understanding those different words, like you ask someone, is your sentence complete? They might say, yeah, but they might just be on non-report, but have a 15-year probation sentence and may not have reported in 5 years. So yeah, so they might feel like they're done. So a lot of people, you have to really pull it out of them, because it's fear. It's fear amongst people, regardless if they feel like you're open or not. They'll still be hesitant in telling you their business because, they've been fighting the system. That's just real. I think we had another hand too.
I think Walisha had a question and I gave her permission to.
Hey everybody, I just had a quick comment. I think we also, when we talk about voting in the space, and I want to just say hey to Sean too, because I've been talking back and forth to him and never get to hear his voice, so it's good to hear his voice actually. But I also wanted to just highlight or just bring in the fact that when we talk about voting, we always talk about, we go to these spaces and we talk about people giving folks who are disabled access to vote, or also rides to the polls, but we never, ever, ever find a way to get those folks to the polls. So I'm hoping that with folks on the call, like the larger organizations who do a lot of the taking folks to the ride to the polls, that's something that we also think about too, because we'll go out and we'll say, hey, we want to get you to the polls. This person in a wheelchair, let's get you to the poll. But guess what? The car ain't equipped for somebody that's in a wheelchair. So those are kind of the things I just want to just kind of highlight as well, because I know it's voting folks on the call. So I would like to know if there's anybody on the call who does votes to the polls, and you all do provide access to folks who are disabled in accessible vans. If you could drop your information in the chat. Yeah, I know a lot of folks get folks to the polls, but when they show up, the van is not handicap accessible. So that's why I wanted to make sure. But if you do, please let me know.
Thank you.
I
Really
see Sean drop New Georgia Project and me.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if Sean had another question, so I'm just gonna unmute you, Sean, in case you do.
I did not have another question unless y'all are gonna let me do a unsolicited request for y'all to hang out with me on June 15th, and I can put the flyer in the chat.
I'll be there,
But,
Sean.
but if that's not allowed, I'll refrain. But if y'all give me 30 seconds to just talk about our day of action that we're gonna have on June 15th on Saturday, I invite everybody on this call to come out. Like I said, I'm gonna put the flyer in the chat, but basically what we're doing is Mechanicsville has one of the highest rates of recidivism in the state. And so when we do voter registration and get out the vote efforts in that community, we find a lot of folks who are just as impacted. So I just want to do a day where we hang out. So we'll have food, we'll have a DJ, we'll talk. You can bring your tabling, you can bring your resources. But as a community, where we just see if we can get some folks in mechanics will register to vote while we also have a good time. So I'm gonna drop the flyer in the chat, and then I'm gonna mute myself because I know that's not what y'all asked me to this meeting to do, but I did it.
sounds good.
It sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. So the floor is still open for just a few minutes if you would like to answer a question. But if not, again, we just want to thank everyone for coming. If you haven't done so already, I know we have talked to a few of you, but if you just in the chat, you want to just drop your name and let us know where, what organization you're representing, and what area you're in, that'd be great for us, just for research purposes. We'd just like to know who's joining us. And again, thank you for your participation and all the wonderful questions. As we also mentioned, both Ann and Dominique are available to come out and do trainings with your teams. We will be hosting future events where we'll have webinars that are similar, and some events that are voting centric that will absolutely help the cause. But again, we thank everybody for your time. If there's any questions or any final comments, this is your time to do it. I see people chiming in. Let's see. Crystal from NGP, thank you. Vote Riders, thank you so much. They're in Columbus. We got Paul with the Advancement Project, Ron Huff with the New Georgia Project in Macon. And of course, that's our crew right there, and Dominique and myself, Brenda. We're here at the Georgia Justice Projects in Atlanta. Maya with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and the Law in DC. Okay, now Elizabeth and Savannah at the NGP office. Catherine is with our vote election protection hotline, which is great. Aaron's a volunteer with the election protection hotline, covering Georgia. Joyce, thanks again for your participation in Daughtry County Democratic Committee. Shayla with NJP. We got Sean with New Georgia Project. Thanks again for your insight. Ian in Athens with NGP. Jeremiah, you are in Albany, or like they say down there, Albany. I get you. That's the New Georgia Project. Thank you so much for your participation. Liz, thank you for participating. Winsome at NGP in Gwinnett. We got was Walicia. Did I say your name right? Did I say that right? Okay. She's with New Life Second Chance. Thanks again for your insight. And yes, Sean, the chat will probably not allow you to share the flyer, but you could always email us and we'll definitely get that information. And everyone who also is joining, if you haven't done so already, follow us on our social media platforms. We're GJP. You can go to our website, gjp.org, and you can find out all of that. Liz is with the Institute of Government, the Vincent Institute of Government in Athens. We got Royce, who is with Fulton Field Lead and New Georgia Project. Tracy with NGP. NGP is deep today. And William with NGP. Randy, thanks for vote riders. Let's see, what's Walisha. I'm going to get that right because I feel like you're going to be one of our people we're going to talk to a lot. So I'm new, so I'm learning all the people. So thanks so much for your patience. And I think we covered everybody. Dr. Terrence Clemens, who is with Sumter County Democratic Committee, Andrew with NGP in Gwinnett County. Because it's Personal Inc. It's a nonprofit. Thanks for joining. And she's and she said, "Shuh, I'm gonna get it all together. We're gonna talk." Give me a call. We're definitely gonna talk. But again, thanks so much for all your participation and your interaction. If you think of a question outside of the webinar, feel free to give us a buzz, or you could always just reach out again and let us know. We're going to share this information. Any closing remarks from Ann, Dominique, or Brenda?
Just thank everyone for attending and bless with your time and keep up the good work, everyone.
And please do reach out with questions. We're happy to field questions from volunteer canvassers, from potential voters. That's what we're here for. Email or call us with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody.